The night my stepmother sent me to the river was the night I truly believed I might not come back alive. The wind was cold, the kind that makes the trees whisper secrets to each other. Our wooden house stood at the edge of a quiet village, surrounded by tall pine trees and long empty roads. People in the village always said the river at night was not a place for the living. But that night, my stepmother looked straight into my eyes and told me I had no choice. My name is Emily Carter. I was 16 years old, thin and quiet, with pale skin and long brown hair that my mother used to brush every morning before she died. Before my real mother passed away, our house was full of warmth. My father used to laugh loudly, and my mother would bake bread that filled the entire house with a sweet smell. I remember her soft voice and the way she hummed while washing dishes. But everything changed after she died. 2 years later, my father married a woman named Margaret. Margaret had bright blonde hair and sharp gray eyes that always looked like they were measuring something. At first, she smiled a lot in front of my father. She spoke gently and acted like she cared about me. But the moment my father left for work, her smile disappeared. "Emily, clean the kitchen. Emily, wash the floors. Emily, don't sit there like a lazy girl." Her voice became a storm that followed me every day. My father worked as a truck driver and often stayed away for many days. Whenever he was gone, Margaret treated me like I was nothing more than a servant. Sometimes she would stare at me with cold eyes and say quietly, "You remind me too much of your mother." And those words always carried a strange anger. That evening started like many others. The sky was turning orange as the sun slowly disappeared behind the forest. I had just finished washing the dishes when Margaret walked into the kitchen. She stood there silently for a moment, watching me wipe the last plate. Then she spoke. "The water barrels are empty." I looked at the barrels near the wall. They were half full. "I can fill them in the morning," I said softly. Her eyes narrowed. "In the morning?" The room suddenly felt colder. "The river is not far. Go fill them now." My heart skipped. The river. Everyone in the village knew stories about the river at night. Old fishermen used to say strange lights sometimes floated above the water. Children were told never to go there after sunset. Some people believed spirits lived in the deep parts of the river. And the path to the river passed through a dark part of the forest. I can go early tomorrow," I whispered. Margaret's lips slowly curved into a thin smile. "Are you refusing me?" "No, I just..." Her voice suddenly became sharp. "You eat in this house, you sleep in this house, you do what I say." I looked towards the door, wishing my father would suddenly walk in, but the house was silent. Margaret grabbed a metal bucket and placed it hard on the floor. The sound echoed through the kitchen. "Take it," she said. I hesitated. She leaned closer to me and whispered something that made my stomach twist. "Unless you want your father to hear that you disobey me." My father believed everything she said. If she told him I was rude or lazy, he would believe her without question. My hand slowly picked up the bucket. "Good," Margaret said calmly. She walked to the door and opened it. Outside, darkness had already swallowed the village. The wind moved through the trees like something alive. "Go," she said. I stepped outside. The cold air touched my face, and I suddenly felt very small in the huge night around me. Behind me, the door closed. The sound of the lock turning echoed in my ears. I stood there for a moment, holding the empty bucket. The village looked different at night. The houses were quiet. Most people had already gone inside. Only the sound of the wind and distant owls filled the air. The narrow dirt path leading to the forest looked like a black tunnel. My heart was beating faster now. I started walking. The bucket swung slightly in my hand as my feet moved along the path. Step, step, step. The further I walked, the quieter everything became. Soon the lights of the village disappeared behind me. The forest trees rose tall on both sides of the path like silent giants. The moon was hidden behind clouds, and the darkness felt thick. Every small sound made my heart jump. A branch snapping, leaves moving, the distant cry of an owl. I hugged the bucket close to my chest as I walked faster. My mother used to tell me stories about this forest when I was little, but her stories were always warm and magical. Now the forest felt cold and watching. Finally, after what felt like forever, I heard it. The sound of water. The river. The trees slowly opened, and the dark shape of the river appeared ahead. The water moved slowly under the night sky. The river looked wider than I remembered, and strangely quiet. Too quiet. The wind stopped. Even the insects seemed to disappear. I walked carefully to the edge of the water and knelt down. The cold air made my fingers shake as I lowered the bucket into the river. The metal touched the water. Splash. Ripples spread across the surface. For a moment, everything was normal. Then something strange happened. The water suddenly began to glow. Not brightly, just a faint pale blue light moving under the surface. My heart stopped. I leaned closer. The glowing light moved slowly beneath the water like something alive. And then I heard a voice. Soft, cold, coming from the river itself. "Emily." My blood turned to ice. The bucket slipped from my hands and fell into the water. Splash. The glowing light grew brighter. The river moved strangely, like it was breathing. And the voice came again, calling my name. "Emily."
"Emily." The voice floated across the surface of the river again. My entire body froze. The night felt suddenly heavier, like the air itself was watching me. The pale blue glow inside the water slowly moved in circles, like something swimming beneath the surface. I wanted to run. Every part of my mind was screaming at me to run back to the village, back to the house, anywhere but here. But my legs would not move. My heart pounded so loudly that it felt like the whole forest could hear it. Amelie. The voice was soft, almost gentle. It did not sound angry. It sounded sad. My hands trembled as I slowly stood up from the riverbank. "Who is there?" I whispered. The forest did not answer. Only the slow movement of the glowing water remained. The light drifted closer to the edge of the river, and I could now see the surface ripple gently. My breathing became shallow. My mother used to tell me that sometimes fear can make your mind imagine things that are not real. Maybe this was just the reflection of the moon behind the clouds. Maybe the voice was just the wind moving through the trees. I swallowed hard and took one step back. The glowing light suddenly stopped moving. Then the river made a soft bubbling sound. The water slowly rose. At first I thought it was just a wave, but then something else happened. A shape began forming inside the glowing water. A tall shape, like a person standing beneath the surface. My mouth slowly opened in silent terror. The shape rose higher and higher until the water around it began to glow brighter. And then it happened. A figure slowly emerged from the river. Water flowed off the shape like falling rain. I stepped back quickly, almost dripping over a rock. Standing in the shallow water was a woman. Her skin looked pale like moonlight. Her long white hair floated around her shoulders as if the water still held it. But the most frightening part was her eyes. They glowed the same soft blue as the river. She looked at me quietly. Not moving, not blinking, just watching. My voice finally returned, though it came out as a tiny whisper. "Please, don't hurt me." The woman tilted her head slightly. Her expression looked almost confused. "Hurt you?" she said softly. Her voice sounded like water flowing over stones. "Child, I called you because you are in danger." I blinked. Her words did not make sense. "In danger?" I asked. She slowly stepped forward. The river did not splash under her feet. The water moved gently around her, as if it welcomed her. "Yes." Her glowing eyes looked straight into mine. "Your stepmother." My stomach tightened. "How do you know about Margaret?" I asked. The woman's face grew sad. "The river sees many things," she said. "The river listens." A cold wind moved through the trees again. The branches above us swayed softly. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to understand what was happening. Who are you?" I asked. For a moment, she did not answer. She looked toward the dark forest behind me, then back at me. "I have many names," she said quietly. "But long ago, the people of this village called me the guardian of the river." My heart skipped again. I remembered something. An old story the village elders used to tell children during winter nights. A story about a spirit who protected the river and the forest. But those stories were always told like fairy tales. Not real. Not standing right in front of me. "You're a spirit?" I asked carefully. She gave a small smile. "If that is the word you understand." I felt dizzy. Nothing about this night made sense anymore. "But why are you calling me?" I asked. "Why my name?" The guardian's glowing eyes softened. "Because tonight, your life was meant to end." My breath stopped. "What?" She raised one pale hand and pointed toward the forest path behind me. "Your stepmother did not send you here for water." A cold feeling spread through my chest. "Then why?" I asked. The guardian looked toward the dark river again. "For many nights she has been watching this place," the spirit said slowly. "She believes the river hides something valuable." I frowned. "Valuable?" The spirit nodded. "Many years ago, a small silver chest was lost in these waters. A chest that contains gold coins and old jewels." My eyes widened. Margaret loved money more than anything. "But what does that have to do with me?" I asked. The guardian looked at me with deep sadness. "She planned to use you." A chill ran down my spine. Use me?" The guardian stepped closer to the riverbank now. Her glowing feet did not leave wet marks on the ground. "She believed if she sent you here at night," the spirit continued, "you might search deeper in the water. And if something happened..." Her voice grew quiet. No one would ask questions. My head began to spin. "Margaret. She sent me here knowing the river could be dangerous." My hands started shaking again. "She wanted me to drown," I whispered. The guardian did not answer immediately, but the silence was enough. My chest felt tight, like the air had disappeared. Tears slowly filled my eyes.
She hates me that much, I said. The spirit's voice became softer. Sometimes the darkness inside people grows too strong. The river behind her glowed gently. But the river does not wish harm upon you, Emily. She extended her hand toward me. I called you because your story is not meant to end here tonight. I stared at her glowing hand. My fear had not disappeared, but something inside her eyes felt kind, like my mother's eyes used to look. What will happen now? I asked quietly. The guardian's eyes suddenly turned toward the forest again. Her expression changed. The soft calm in her face disappeared, and for the first time, she looked worried. You must leave, she said quickly. My heart jumped. Why? Her glowing eyes focused on the dark trees. Because you are not the only one sent here tonight. My breath caught. What do you mean? The wind suddenly blew harder. Branches shook. Leaves rustled loudly. Then, footsteps. Slow, crunching through the forest path. Someone was coming toward the river, and the guardian whispered something that made my blood run cold. Your stepmother is here.
The footsteps grew louder. Crunch, crunch, crunch. My heart began to beat wildly again. The dark path through the trees seemed to breathe as the sound of someone approaching echoed closer and closer. She's coming, the guardian whispered. Her glowing eyes were fixed on the forest. What do? I asked, my voice shaking. Hide, she said quickly. But where? The guardian raised her hand and pointed toward a large fallen tree near the riverbank. Its thick trunk lay on the ground, covered with moss and shadows. Behind that log, she said. Hurry. Without thinking, I grabbed the empty bucket and ran quietly toward the fallen tree. My feet moved as softly as possible across the cold grass. I slipped behind the large trunk and crouched down. The wood smelled damp and old. From my hiding place, I could still see the river. The glowing water had suddenly gone dark again. The guardian was gone. She had disappeared beneath the surface as if she had never been there. For a moment, the river looked completely normal, just dark water moving slowly under the cloudy night sky. Then the footsteps stopped. A figure appeared at the edge of the trees. My stomach tightened. It was Margaret. My stepmother stepped out of the forest carrying a lantern in one hand. The yellow light flickered across her face, making her sharp features look even colder. She looked around slowly. The wind moved her blonde hair slightly. So, she murmured, you came after all. My hands covered my mouth to stop myself from breathing too loudly. She walked closer to the riverbank, lifting the lantern higher. The light reflected off the moving water. Then her eyes landed on the empty spot where I had been standing earlier. Her lips curved into a small smile. Emily, she called. Her voice sounded sweet, too sweet. Emily, are you here? I stayed perfectly still. Margaret stepped closer to the water and looked down. The bucket I dropped earlier was floating slowly near the shore. She stared at it for a moment. Then she laughed quietly. Well. She leaned down and picked up the bucket. I suppose the river did its job. My heart felt like it had been stabbed. Did its job. Tears filled my eyes again as I listened. Margaret stood straight and looked out across the dark water. I knew sending that useless girl here at night would work, she said calmly, always so obedient. Her voice carried no sadness, no guilt, only satisfaction. Then she spoke words that made my blood turn cold. If she drowned, it saves me the trouble. I pressed my hand harder against my mouth to stop a cry from escaping. She really wanted me dead. Margaret turned slowly, holding the lantern up again. The light moved across the riverbank. For a terrifying moment, it came close to the fallen tree where I was hiding. I froze completely. If she walked a few steps closer, she would see me. But then something strange happened. The river behind her suddenly made a quiet splash. Margaret stopped. She turned slowly toward the sound. What was that? She murmured. The water moved again. A small ripple spread across the surface. Margaret stepped closer to the river. Her eyes narrowed. Is someone there? She asked sharply. Silence. Only the slow movement of the river answered. Margaret lifted the lantern higher. The light touched the water. Then suddenly, the blue glow appeared again. The same soft, ghostly light from before. It spread slowly across the surface like mist. Margaret gasped. What? The glow grew brighter. The river began to swirl.
Then the guardian rose from the water again. Her pale form lifted slowly into the lantern light. Margaret stumbled backward in shock. What in the world? Her voice cracked. The guardian stood quietly in the water, glowing softly. Her eyes were calm, but powerful. "Leave this place," the spirit said. Her voice echoed strangely across the riverbank. Margaret's fear quickly turned into anger. You're some kind of trick," she snapped. Her hands tightened around the lantern. "I know what this is. Some stupid village legend." The guardian's glowing eyes did not change. "You came here for greed," the spirit said. Margaret scoffed. "Yes, and I'll get what I came for." She pointed toward the river. "There's treasure down there. Gold, jewels." The guardian's voice remained calm. "The river protects what it holds." Margaret stepped closer to the water, her face twisted with determination. "Then I'll take it myself." She placed the lantern on the ground and began rolling up her sleeves. My eyes widened in horror. She was really going into the river. The guardian watched her quietly. "If you enter these waters with greed in your heart," the spirit warned, "the river will judge you." Margaret laughed coldly. "I don't believe in your silly threats." She stepped into the water. Splash! The cold river reached her ankles. She took another step. Splash! Now the water touched her knees. The glowing blue light around the guardian suddenly grew brighter. The river began to swirl faster, but Margaret ignored it. She walked deeper into the dark water. Soon the river reached her waist. "Where's the chest?" she shouted angrily. "I know it's here." The guardian's voice echoed across the river. "The river has already decided." Margaret turned suddenly. What does that mean? At that moment, the water around her began to move violently. The calm river became wild. Waves rose around Margaret's body. What? She tried to step back toward the shore, but the river pulled her feet. Her eyes filled with panic. Wait! The water rose higher, up to her chest, then her shoulders. No! She reached toward the riverbank desperately. "Help me!" But the water dragged her deeper. Her lantern light flickered wildly on the shore. "Help me!" she screamed. Then the river swallowed her. The water closed above her head. The forest fell silent again. The waves slowly calmed. The glowing blue light faded, and the river returned to its quiet flow, as if nothing had happened. Behind the fallen tree, I sat frozen in shock. My stepmother was gone. The guardian slowly turned her glowing eyes toward my hiding place, and she spoke softly. "Emily, you can come out now."
For several seconds, I could not move. My body felt frozen behind the fallen tree. My heart was still racing after everything I had just seen. Margaret was gone. The river had swallowed her. The forest had become quiet again, but the silence felt heavy, like the night itself was thinking about what had just happened. Then the gentle voice of the guardian came again. "Emily, you are safe now." Slowly, my stiff legs began to move. I carefully stood up from behind the fallen tree. My knees were shaking as I stepped toward the riverbank. The lantern Margaret had brought still burned on the ground, its small flame flickering in the cold wind. The guardian stood in the shallow water, glowing softly like moonlight on snow. Her white hair floated gently around her shoulders, as if the river was still holding it. I stopped a few steps away from the water. My voice was barely a whisper. Is she really gone?" The guardian looked at the dark river for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. The river judged her heart. A chill ran through me. I looked down at the water. It looked so calm now, just a normal river again. But I knew what it had done. Did the river kill her?" I asked quietly. The guardian's glowing eyes returned to me. "The river does not act from anger," she said gently. "It protects balance." Her voice was calm, but there was something powerful inside it. Greed, cruelty, and darkness can destroy a person long before the river ever touches them. I lowered my eyes. Margaret had hated me for so long, but hearing that she was truly gone made my chest feel strange. Not happy, not sad, just empty. The wind moved softly through the trees again. The guardian slowly stepped closer to the shore. The water parted gently around her feet. "You should not stay here much longer," she said. "The night is deep, and the forest holds many shadows." I nodded slowly. Yes, I should go home. But the word home suddenly felt strange. My father was still there, but Margaret had controlled everything in the house. Now she was gone. What would happen next? The guardian seemed to understand my thoughts. "Your path will change after tonight," she said softly. Then she turned toward the center of the river. The glowing light began to return beneath the water again. The river slowly began to shimmer like a sky full of tiny stars. "Come closer, Emily," she said. My heart beat nervously again, but I trusted her now. Slowly, I stepped closer to the water. The cool air touched my face as I stood at the very edge of the riverbank. The guardian raised her pale hand. The glowing water began to swirl gently. Then something slowly rose from beneath the surface. A small object appeared in the water. At first, I thought it was just a rock, but as it rose higher, I saw it clearly. It was a small silver chest. The metal looked old but beautiful. Strange carvings covered its surface, and the moonlight reflected off it softly. My eyes widened. "The treasure," I whispered. The guardian nodded. "Yes." The chest floated slowly toward the shore until it stopped near my feet. I hesitated. "Why are you giving this to me?" I asked. The guardian's glowing eyes looked peaceful. "Because your heart is not ruled by greed." The river light reflected across her pale face. "Your stepmother came here to steal from the river. But you came because you were forced." I slowly knelt down near the chest. My fingers touched the gold-silver surface. It felt real. Very real. "But I don't need treasure," I said softly. The guardian smiled gently. "This is not only treasure." She touched the water with her fingers. "It is a new beginning." My hand slowly opened the small chest. Inside, golden coins shined softly in the lantern light. But there were other things too. Old rings with beautiful stones, a silver necklace, and small jewels that glowed with many colors. My breath caught in my throat. There was enough here to change a life. The guardian spoke again. "Use it wisely. Protect your future. Protect your father." Her words made me look up. "My father," I said quietly. The guardian nodded. "He is not a cruel man, but he has been blind." I knew she was right. My father had never seen the way Margaret treated me when he was gone. Will he believe what happened tonight? I asked the guardian toward the distant village lights. "Truth always finds its way to the surface," she said. Then her glowing form slowly began to fade. The blue light around her began softer. "Wait," I said quickly. "There's something I want to ask." She paused. "What is it, child?" I swallowed nervously. "Will I ever see you again?" The guardian's glowing eyes looked kind. "The river is always here."
Her voice became softer and softer, and it will always watch over those who respect it. Her form slowly dissolved into glowing mist. The light sank gently back into the water. Soon the river was dark again. The guardian was gone. I stood alone on the quiet riverbank. The forest wind moved softly around me. At my feet sat the silver chest. My heart was still racing, but something else had appeared inside me too. Hope. Slowly I closed the chest and picked it up. It was heavier than it looked, but I held it tightly. Then I picked up the lantern. The path through the forest waited ahead. Step by step, I began walking back toward the village. But as I reached the edge of the trees, a strange thought crossed my mind. Tonight had changed everything, and when I returned home, nothing would ever be the same again.
The forest path felt different as I walked back toward the village. Before, every sound had filled me with fear. Now, the night felt calmer, almost peaceful. The lantern in my hand lit the narrow dirt road ahead, and the silver chest was pressed tightly against my chest. The wind moved softly through the tall pine trees above me. Their branches swayed slowly, like dark shadows dancing in the sky. Step by step, I walked forward. My legs were tired, but my mind was wide awake. Everything that had happened at the river kept replaying inside my head. The glowing water, the guardian rising from the river, Margaret screaming as the river pulled her under. I still could not believe it was real. Sometimes it felt like a dream, but the heavy silver chest in my hands reminded me that it was not a dream at all. It had truly happened. After a long walk, the trees slowly began to thin out. Soon, the small houses of the village appeared in the distance. The lantern light in a few windows showed that some people were still awake. The village looked quiet and normal, like nothing strange had happened that night. But for me, everything had changed. When I reached our house, I stopped at the front door. The house looked exactly the same as always. The wooden walls, the small porch, the crooked fence. But something was different now. Margaret was not inside. For the first time since she came into our lives, the house felt free. I slowly pushed the door open. The old wood creaked softly. Inside, the house was dark and quiet. I set the silver chest gently on the kitchen table and placed the lantern beside it. The yellow light filled the room. Everything looked the same as when I left earlier that night. The dishes, the wooden chairs, the water barrels by the wall. But this time, the silence did not feel scary. I walked to my small bedroom and sat down on the edge of the bed. My body suddenly felt very heavy. All the fear and shock from the night began catching up with me. I lay down for a moment. Just for a moment, I told myself. But my eyes slowly closed. And before I knew it, I fell asleep. When I woke up, sunlight was shining through the window. Bright morning light filled the room. For a second, I forgot everything that had happened. Then I remembered. I jumped out of bed and rushed to the kitchen. The silver chest was still there on the table. Real, heavy, full of gold and jewels. My heart began beating fast again. Then I heard something outside. A truck engine. I ran to the window. My father's old blue truck was pulling into the yard. My stomach twisted. Father was home earlier than expected. He stepped out of the truck, stretching his back like he always did after a long drive. His brown hair was messy, and his face looked tired. But something else caught my attention. He looked confused. Very confused. He walked up to the house quickly and pushed the door open. "Margaret," he called. No answer. He walked into the kitchen and saw me standing there. "Emily," he said. His voice sounded worried. "Where is Margaret?" My heart began to race. This was the moment. I swallowed hard. She went to the river last night." My father frowned. "The river?" "Yes." I slowly told him everything. How Margaret forced me to go to the river. How she followed me later. How the river pulled her under. I did not mention the guardian. I knew he might not believe that part. But I told him the truth about everything else. As I spoke, my father's face slowly changed. First confusion, then shock, then guilt. Deep guilt.
When I finished, the kitchen was silent. My father sat down slowly in one of the wooden chairs. He looked older somehow, more tired. I didn't know, he said quietly. His voice cracked. I should have seen how she treated you. He rubbed his face with his hands. I'm sorry, Emily. Those words surprised me. My father was not a man who said sorry often. He stood up and walked over to me. Then he hugged me tightly. I promise things will be different now, he said. For the first time in years, I felt safe in his arms. Later that day, people from the village went to search the river after hearing Margaret was missing. But they never found her. The river kept its secret. As the weeks passed, life slowly changed. My father spent more time at home. The house became warm again, like it used to be when my mother was alive. We repaired the broken fence. We planted flowers in the yard. And one evening, I showed him the silver chest. His eyes widened when he saw the gold and jewels. But we did not spend the treasure foolishly. My father sold a few pieces and used the money to fix the house and start a small shop in the village. The rest of the treasure stayed safely hidden. Years later, people in the village sometimes told stories about the river. They spoke about strange blue lights seen on quiet nights. And sometimes, a glowing woman standing in the water. Whenever I heard those stories, I would smile quietly. Because I knew the truth. The river was not a place of darkness. It was a place of balance. And somewhere deep beneath its calm waters, the guardian was still watching. Protecting the river. Protecting the forest. And maybe, still watching over me. The end.